Saturday, May the 5th, 1979. It was a warm, sunny morning in Birmingham, Alabama, and the downtown newspaper offices of the Birmingham News were buzzing with activity as usual. But on this particular morning, there was one piece of news that was creating something of a stir in the newsroom. Reports were coming in over the police scanner of a brown or beige Dodge driving around Birmingham with what appeared to be a human hand sticking out of the back of the car. Several members of the public, alarmed at this sight, had already called the police, but the car had not yet been located. Now remember, this is 1979, so no cell phones, no social media, no CCTV, and no GPS tracking. Just somebody finding a payphone and ringing the police, by which time the car could be miles away. Intrigued by the bizarre story and the fact that the car was still on the loose, news editor Garland Reeves sent out two men to try and find it, veteran photographer Jerry Ayers and summer intern Mark Winne. The latest reports coming from the scanner placed the car somewhere on Interstate 20, so Ayers and Winne headed directly there, keeping in constant contact with Reeves, who relayed the latest location reports to the pair via the car radio. But it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. A brown Dodge wasn't exactly the kind of car that just jumped out at you on an interstate filled with hundreds of other cars. However, after around 3 hours of fruitless searching and on the verge of giving up, the young intern Mark Winne spotted the car. It was indeed a battered old brown Dodge, Alabama license plate EDX 003. 3 people were inside, 2 men and a female driver. And there was a hand sticking out of the trunk, and the fingers were wiggling. Winne radioed back to Garland Reeves, who asked if he should call the police. Winne answered without hesitation, "Yes, this isn't a joke." Jerry Ayers, who was driving, told Winne to take the wheel while he leaned out of the driver's window and started snapping photographs of the rear of the car and the fingers sticking out of the back. Meanwhile, Garland Reeves had been straight on to the police, who replied with an urgent request: "Don't lose that car." Now the roles were reversed. Winne and Ayers were reporting the car's location, while Garland Reeves relayed the information back to the police. The car stayed on the I-20, passing downtown Birmingham and heading northeast. But as they approached the airport, it became apparent that the Dodge had spotted the men following, and it exited the interstate at Airport Boulevard and headed into a residential neighbourhood. The 2 newspaper men followed, but they realised that this could end very badly for them. As Jerry Ayers said to Winne, "Mark, I'm fine with chasing them all over Birmingham, but if they turn around and point a gun at us, I'm going the other way." But regardless of the personal danger that they might be in, the 2 men stuck to their guns and followed the Dodge through the streets. By now, the Dodge was actively trying to throw them off, making erratic turns, coming to sudden stops, and reversing towards them. But Ayers and Winne doggedly followed. As Winne said, "We had a responsibility, a moral responsibility, a journalistic responsibility, to stay with that car." Finally, as the Dodge was attempting to leave the area once more, the police arrived, a whole convoy of cruisers with lights flashing. The Dodge was quickly boxed in, the occupants arrested, and the trunk was opened. Inside, battered, wounded and disoriented, was 35-year-old Gary Collier, whose first request was for if somebody could give him a cigarette. When he told his story, it turned out that he'd had a very close call indeed. Collier had been out drinking the night before in a bar in Bessemer, where he had met the 2 assailants, 27-year-old Joseph Fendley and 24-year-old Robin Green. They were getting along all right, but when Fendley and Green started downing whiskey shots and taking illegal drugs, Collier decided it was time to leave. However, Fendley and Green had other ideas, and they followed him out into the car park, where they assaulted him, attacked him with a screwdriver, stole the $350 he had on him after cashing his disability check, and finally bundled him into the trunk of the Dodge. There then followed a nightmarish 14-hour car journey. Collier recalled drifting in and out of consciousness as the exhaust fumes wafted into the trunk, and he heard his captors discussing how to finish him off and arguing about the best place to dump his body. He was sure that he was going to die, as he told police, I'd done made my peace, or was trying to. Strangely enough, come morning they were still driving around Birmingham, having briefly stopped en route to pick up Fendley's uncle, 49-year-old Wilbur Fendley, who joined the pair of criminals for the last leg of the trip. By now, Collier was convinced that they must have left the state because they'd been driving for so long, but he didn't give up. He managed to pry away the rubber seal on the trunk rim, and although this seemingly trivial action yielded no immediate results, it did in fact save his life, as he was able to push his fingers through the gap, and the rest is history. Thanks to the dogged determination of 2 local journalists, his life had been saved, and he was able to enjoy that much-needed cigarette. Winne and Ayers went back to the office where they were greeted with rapturous applause. Ayers went off home to get some rest, but he was soon woken up by a phone call asking him to return quickly to the office to get his photograph taken. Why? He asked. Because this story is running up, they said. To borrow a modern phrase for an old story, the photograph of the hand in the trunk was going viral. The pictures had been syndicated nationally and were also gaining traction internationally. People from New York to Rome to Berlin and Tokyo were seeing the photographs of the hand in the trunk and reading the exploits of Ayers and Winne. As Jerry Ayers later said, it was my 15 minutes of fame. Everyone else involved in the story quickly faded back into obscurity. We know that these 3 were arrested and initially charged with robbery and kidnap, although it appears Wilbur Fendley was released without charge, as Collier was already in the trunk before he got into the car. I guess he was able to convince the judge that it was all just a big surprise to him when police opened up the boot and Collier popped out. There is no readily available record of what charges the other 2 ended up facing, or whether they were convicted and spent any time behind bars. As for Collier, he also disappeared from the story. One can only hope that after this brush with death, he was able to pick his drinking buddies with a little more care, and then he went on to live a long and happy life.